welcome to my studio. So I'm going to do a 4-hour painting of Tom here. Here he comes. Hello, darling.
Hello.
And Tom is very kindly going to model for me so that I can show you the process that I use for this 4-hour thing. So it's the sort of thing I used for that portrait of Caroline and that I use in the show. So while Tom sets up, I'll show you the first bits and bobs. This is the what I use for sketching. So I had pre-prepared old scraps of paper of the same scale as the canvas. I'm using a slightly smaller canvas today just to be a bit quicker. Then I can sketch out the composition on there and I can try it portrait and landscape really quickly. And then for the first hour I use acrylic, and I found this was a really good container. It's out of a fridge and it meant that I could put the acrylic paint there on that ledge, put the water in there, and then I can control how dark I have it. And then the other thing that you'll see me using is my squirty bottle. Where's the squirty bottle? Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to need that other thing next to it. So, squirty bottle, great for keeping it from drying out. I didn't want to use any opener, any medium, acrylic medium to keep it wet, because I wanted to dry at the end of that hour really quickly before I start painting. You'll see me use a mirror as well, which I can use to look at the subject next to my painting, reversed. Right, better get cracking. How are you doing, Tom?
Nearly so.
Lovely. So that's great. Tom's going to be roughly at my eye level, which is really good, so I'm not looking down on him. And you might notice I've used light just to bump up the light, the natural light that's coming in from that side. So it's really helpful, I found, to have one-sided light, and so that's what I'm using today. Okay, so this first bit needs to be super quick. Later I'll move into a time lapse, but I've got my canvas there. This is the same proportions, so I'm looking at possibly doing full length, which would be like that. So we'd have like head here, shoulders. I like that foot in the light. You can see his foot there. That looks so cool. But that would make his head really quite small on the page. So I don't think that's going to work, but we'll see. For a likeness, it's quite hard getting a likeness with such a... But these feet are great how they catch the light there. So there would be, in terms of composition, there would be a huge light, bright light bit there, bright light there, bright light there, and light on the side of his face. And he has got a great shadow there. There. Okay, so that's number one. And I think the other option is a closer crop. So whether to include those hands. Well, I could do a big crop. I could do that. That's one option, like that. Which I rather like. And the nice thing about that is it would give me much more room to get his face, get his likeness. Likeness is obviously in the pose as well, but that's the... And then the light, the highlights, there would be a big one there. Get my hand under here. Big one on the side of his face. So in the context of the hour, I would expect to spend, 5 minutes maybe on this, but that's 5 really precious minutes during which I need to decide. I think I'm going to be led partly by the fact that I'm working with a slightly smaller canvas, also by the fact that at 11 years old, I think that's a tall order to ask Tom to hold his feet in that fabulous position all this time, and the scale. So I think straight away I'm going to go with this, possibly very slightly smaller, but that's going to be my, and that will give me enough to catch that shadow there. And even when the light fades, I know I'll have that shadow. Okay, right, I'll move into time lapse now. So this is my container, and I'm squeezing out the acrylic, add some water spray to dampen the canvas, and then just use a soft brush to spread on a kind of tonal underlayer. And I can then pull that out with the damp rag. So that's my very early marks, just cutting out the background and then using the big brush again to make those big shapes. Just looking at angles, trying to make sure I've got the right amount of gap around the edges, so a bit of airspace above the head, and then using a thinner brush. At the moment I'm not using lots of contrast, as I'm just really trying to get the shapes in the right place. So it's looking at the skull. With people with hairstyles like this, they're really good. The hairline is a great indicator of the angle of the head. I've given him a really strong jaw, which I take out later, but it's quite useful to just note where the jaw meets the bottom of the ear. Just marking out the darkest areas of the hair, trying to see it as a big shape. And that's inspired by Mark Doherty. I do that, just pick out the a blob for each eye. I've noticed when he draws, he just captures, he doesn't need any more a lot of the time. I really like that effect. Anyway, it's very good for navigating your way around a face, I find. And then using a damp cloth, I can lift out some highlights. So I'm sort of alternating between seeking to add darks and lift out lights, and trying to work out what's darkest and how the different values and shapes relate to each other. Quite a lot of squinting happens at this point. And getting these colours about the right value to what I want in the end, that's the lightness and darkness, means that if in the next stage, if when I'm painting, oh, he wanted his knee scratched. I didn't get it right. Yes, I like that triangle there on his t-shirt, but by getting the values right, it means that if the oil paint, for some reason I miss a bit or can't cover all the acreage of the canvas during the rest of the painting, if the value's right, it won't jump out. And sometimes it can actually look really effective to leave some of the underpainting showing through. So just checking, I was really struggling to find that shape of his, the width of his shoulders, because he's slightly sideways on. So I was using that triangle and measuring with the brush. Just moving around the painting, looking for clues, looking for how things line up. Checking in the mirror. And that really helps me see it with fresh eyes, so I can make a few adjustments. Sometimes you can't really see, when you've been looking at the painting, you can't see glaringly obvious wonky bits, like, you know, if the eyes are in the wrong place, or one of them might be in the wrong angle, or looking in a different direction to the sitter's eyes. That circle on his head there, that's me trying to make sure I've got the right amount of mass in the hair. using the mirror quite a lot at this point, off camera. This is where life drawing really helps. Doing a lot of life drawing is great practice for this sort of thing. And when I'm drawing in life drawing at speed, I always use a toned background because it's so much quicker. Checking those measurements again. You can see I measure him and then I measure my picture. Checking the relative lengths of things. The underpainting is dry now. Tom's back in position for his second hour and I'm going to block in using oil paints. So I use certain colours all the time and then I have a few which I put on specific to the situation. My absolute bankers are burnt umber and French ultramarine, and I usually use Michael Harding warm white. I also really like a Windsor orange. I just use it for warming up stuff. It's a really good cheaty way to warm up any colour. It's a nice mid tone. And I use alizarin crimson and quinacridone red. So those are quite sort of pinky reds. And then it just depends on what the flesh tone and background is of the sitter. So in Tom's case, pretty neutral, I would say. Yeah, so I think I'm going to be going for subtle colours and looking for things I can pick up for highlights. So I think I'm seeing some lovely warm highlights on that white. I really like this yellow ochre and really old Rowney Georgian, but it's is it yellow oxide? I think it's called. I'm not sure what the pigment's called, but it's just nice and warm and not too much trouble. Right, so that's reds, yellows, and then I have for cooling down. So I use that orange for warming up and other things, and then for cooling down I've got a sort of turquoisey colour, and I usually have a couple of yellows, but I probably won't bother with that for now. Oh, and burnt sienna I find pretty useful too. Okay, right, so you okay, Tom?
Yeah.
Right, let's start.
Let's do this.
So I tend to start by doing the background. It's a nice way to get into a painting if you're feeling a little bit intimidated, and it's usually a relatively easy thing to judge, and once that background is in, you can judge the colours on the figure or the subject better, I find. But I did want to slightly make it pop. I was definitely wanted to get that. It's almost like a second portrait, that shadow. So I did slightly over egg the blue in there deliberately. It makes a nice foil for his warm flesh. And it's just like a second portrait. And you'll see me soften the edge just there. As you probably know, shadows get sharper as they're closer to the subject, depending on the light, but I had a nice strong light going there. And then a rather more subtle shadow there. So next I'm going in, mapping out the darks in the t-shirt. And things like this are really great for showing form. You know, having that good strong side light is incredibly helpful.
and I've gone quite cool, planning to go warm on the lights on that t-shirt. I would normally mix up quite a lot more background than that because I would normally work on a larger canvas, but for this demo I'm just using a relatively small canvas. Sneaky wave by Tom there. And then I was really struggling to make that white warm enough to go and get a better, I think I got the yellow ochre out to warm it up. In this light, on this film, it actually looks colder than the shadows in the t-shirt. Okay, so going in, trying to see the big shadow shapes. They're pretty standard. When you've got a good side light, you always pretty much get the same kind of shapes in the shadows. It's just a question of where those shapes are on that particular model. You can see Tom kind of was starting to slump at this point, engrossed in his video. Again, really trying to resist the temptation to draw in hairs and just massing in the big shape of his hair. So while the subject's shuffling around, I quite often do a bit of background until they've settled again. That's quite an epic shuffle. And you can see his arms have moved quite a bit. But, he did a very good job, really. And he was quite reluctant to be doing this, so I was very grateful. I try and make it as fun as possible so that he models again. He doesn't refuse. So here I am really trying to kind of reserve some brights. And while I had that colour on the brush, I just did a tiny bit of blush in his cheeks. And then you can see I'm just trying out a colour on his temple. Ears, of course, often are really quite pink compared to other parts of the body. Tom's got lovely, naturally golden skin like his dad. Very lucky with his complexion. And he's inherited freckles from us both. But more of those later. Meanwhile, just trying to hold my nerve, not panic, and just rigidly do what I see. Oh, that was a mistake there.
Right, so that's the blocking done. So my next step is to turn the image and compare it with a photograph. I feel as though the likeness isn't too bad on this one at the moment, but it's really hard to tell. I use a mirror a lot, but I find this is a very reliable way And a sitter, especially a sitter this age, will often move. And when you're doing things like aligning eyes, it's quite good to have a reference. So for the sake of doing it according to the process, I will use the photo a little bit. So I try not to take a photo at the beginning because the sitter often slumps a little bit. And I've got a particularly bad photo of Tom here. But I think that will be enough for me just to maybe get his eyelids in and just check a few of the relative values. I'm not going to really use it for the shape of the head because I think the shape of the head is fine and it's rather distorted in this photo. But for features like eyes and, as I said, relative values, I think this can be quite useful. Okay. Right, sorry, rather infuriatingly, I didn't manage to turn the camera on. So I've gone and painted a bit off camera, but I'll tell you what I did. So I've slightly shaped the eyes just to get that eyelid and the tear ducts in the right place. Slightly darkened the bottom lip. I've gone in with like in the creases, I like to use a dark red. So that's alizarin crimson and burnt umber in there. I've done a little bit of reshaping of the ear, cut in here with the background. So one top tip that I forgot to mention is I always keep a little puddle of the background to hand for doing things like that. And also I did this edge, recut in that edge, which I think I might actually just, because it's quite a close match, I'm tempted to just slightly soften that edge there, almost lose it. I can always tighten it up again, but once you've got a tight edge, it's quite hard to loosen it once it's dry. And actually I'm going to do the last session in the morning, so it will be a bit drier because I've used quite a lot of medium in this paint. That gives me more options then. And then I've tidied up this t-shirt because the modelling of the folds of the arm, that's not really critical. I don't think I really need to do that from life. So next session, I'm going to turn it back and have Tom with me. So sorry about not filming that, but hopefully you get the idea. It's the least interesting bit, the bit that's done from the photo, but it can make quite a difference to the likeness. And then of course I can turn it over and see whether it's succeeded. Fresh eyes. Right, so ready to start the final session. It won't be quite an hour because this is quite a small picture. But while Tom is setting up, I've got my brushes there. And here I have, going to be using, I'm basically going to be strengthening and intensifying some of the brights. So I've got some nice orange puddles of orange and white, pink, and then some nice darks there. So I shouldn't really need any more paint. How are you doing, model? Very demure. Right, so now it's just holding the nerve and tidying up. I watched a really good long form video by Cesar Santos a couple of years ago, a painting he did of his wife, and I found it very inspiring how he just patiently went over, not over fixing things, and that's really helped me. Just take a moment and look carefully when things don't quite look right. Obviously, if they don't look right, they're probably not right. But there are other tips that come in from life drawing, particularly when you're positioning features. For example, well, in this case, I just put that reflected light
on his right cheek on our left, that little bit of light, but that should always stay darker than the darkest light, so it's still in the shadow area. And then for positioning features, it's good to always stop and think. You know, if you think the eye is too high, should you move the top of the head up or the eye down, or you know, it's just looking. There's usually several ways that you can fix something, and I would always tend to fix towards the centre, so not let it creep. So keep that head. I like the sort of air above the head. And that way it doesn't throw everything else out. So once you've got that envelope of the sort of outside of the shape, it's quite good to just kind of relate everything within that and not extend beyond it. I really don't do much blending, more try and just match up the paint, and I try and be careful to keep the brush fairly clean. So you can see I've got maybe 3 or 4 brushes on the go, some round, some flat. I've been leaning more and more towards rounds recently, just getting at mapping in that high level bit of his hand. Don't normally just draw a line like that between fingers, but in this case it just felt like that was all that was needed. So now I'm trying to sort out the hue of the hair, which I'd got far too cool. He's got very golden hair. So I cracked open the cadmium yellow. And right at the end you'll see me get the dart out, I think, and just scrape out a few hairs, but really that's a luxury that shouldn't be needed. I was trying to soften that edge there where the hair is thin, thins out as it almost blends into the skin. I thought I'd warm up that shadow a little bit. In fact, you can see from my top, this is actually another day. Normally I'd work on it in one session, but I think possibly the light is slightly warmer today. Modelling the nose. And then when I'm modelling the mouth, basically, because it's easier with oils to put light paint, sits better on dark. When I model the upper lip, I go in with the darker hue and then a line of lighter. So I really try and see the lips as big shapes. Got the very fine point out there to do the eyes. But really you have to force yourself to put it down and get a bigger brush out. I put a lot of red in those deep folds because the light bounces around even in the shadow with the blood under the skin, and bouncing between. There's that bit of modelling on the top lip. And I think I went in with something a bit lighter after that. So we're coming to the point where Tom starts telling me it's nearly time to stop. He did a little bit of reading at the end. I never use black out of the tube, so this is a mixture of burnt umber and French ultramarine. I've just never found I can make it look lively out of the tube of black. I find this way I can control the warmth or coolness of the black much better. Freckles? He did a little bit of reading, and there I am scratching in with the dart, just a tiny bit in his hair, and just those eyelashes, but that's it. Check in the mirror, a little bit of fine tuning, particularly of the eyes. So at this point I'm really trying to humour him because he's super bored, and I know those details can kill or cure it. Those, particularly the layout of the eyes. Don't want to overwork them, but they really need to be in the right place. Look at him, he's really had enough. He's so good. Those pyjamas, by the way, are from Pyjama Pantry. Fantastic company, I highly recommend. Right, there we go, look at that. Just trying to keep him talking and get the last few strokes out. So the eagle-eyed might have spotted, this is a beautiful brush holder, handmade by my friend Ali's granddad. So it's got loads of holes of different sizes. I tend to keep the big ones at the back, little ones at the front. So I've got a nice section for really little riggers and things here. And then also towards the front in a particular area, I'll keep together all the kind of brushes that are on the go. So at the end of the session, I know which ones to wash. So thanks, Ali. I love it. It's great. Oh, that's cute. Right.
Right. Thank you, Stephen. Please turn your canvas.
Don't you say artist, put down your brushes.
No. Pause the pause.
Just start again. It's fine. It's fine.
Okay. No.
Right. So sit down. Sit back.
I'm sitting back,
Okay.
and then I'm pretending because I'm gonna run upstairs after this. Then I'm gonna come down and we can record. Artist, please step away from your canvas and turn it around.
All right. Okay. So what are you pretending now?
So I'm pretending I've already said that, or Stephen has already said that.
Okay. Yeah.
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 And now I'm getting up and you're flipping your canvas.
I see. Right. Okay. Right. So just 1 second though. Can I just do one little thing?
Oh my God, Mum.
Right. Yep. Okay.
Okay.
So.
Whipped cream, gluten-free, oxygen-free, buy one get none free, and it's not expired. Get it at www.petsmart.portraitartistoftheyear.whippedcream.co.uk. Artists, please put down your brushes and step away from the canvas.
Oh.
Thank you. Now, if you will please, flippeth the easel.
Okay.
Let the judging commence. Hello again. Wow, I think this is an extraordinary piece of work. You can really see the details on the freckles of the face, and the ear is very nicely curved. I think my favourite will have to be this one.
Oh, hooray! Thank you.
Thank you.